Welcome to CyberBytes, the podcast. I'm your host, Stefan Foley, Senior Recruitment Consultant at Aspiron Search. Today, I'm joined by Vivienne Hsu, Head of Marketing at Converge. Vivienne shares her journey in marketing, some of the key challenges within the marketing industry over the last 5 years, and how Converge is built differently and their vision. Enjoy. Vivienne, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you, Stefan, for having me. I'm excited to chat to you. Yeah, looking forward to our discussion.
Absolutely. Yeah, me too. Where are you currently in the world?
I am actually based in London, but I've worked in the States and I grew up in Canada.
Okay, interesting background. Whereabouts in Canada?
Toronto.
Very nice. Okay, cool. Well, Vivienne, to introduce yourself, for those that don't know you, do you mind just giving a brief intro to yourself and your background?
Sure. I'm Vivienne Hsu. I'm the head of marketing at Converge Insurance, which is based out of New York. And I have been working in, some version of marketing and comms for more than 20 years. I started my career in brand advertising, working for WPP and Omnicom agencies. And then I started working on some big financial institution clients there in insurance and banking. And then I ended up moving more into specialized sort of consulting for marketing with financial institutions on the B2B side. So kind of got way more in depth into asset management, banking, fintech, etc. So that's what I have been doing for the last sort of 10, 15 years. And, that's how my career kind of led me in-house, working more in the fintech space, which is how I've ended up at Converge.
Cool. Okay, nice. Keen to dig a little bit deeper into your background. So where I like to start is to try and understand how people have got to where they are in current state. And obviously you yourself, you run your own consultancy, you hold multiple leadership positions, you've been recognized for Europe's most influential women within startups. So can you give us an idea of your background, starting from where it started, and just talk us through the journey of how you got to Converge?
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of people, there's a little bit of good timing, accidental stuff that happens along the way. I think I ended up, interestingly enough, in that, when I talk about sort of at WPP and Omnicom, I worked on, quite frankly, a lot of accounts that other people didn't work on. So like if you come from a big agency background, the sexy accounts are cars and, FMCG and alcohol and things like that, not finance. And so I do not have a finance background. I have a liberal arts degree, and I was a political science and English major. And so I was very good at writing and communicating with people. And so I really that's why I started my career in advertising, because I really loved being able to, the idea of building brands and messaging that could provide interest and influence, but also gave people useful information and like did it in an interesting way. And that's what advertising does very, very well, right? It conveys messages very quickly and succinctly, but cleverly. So I kind of cut my teeth in that area. And then what happened was I ended up working on, some big financial accounts. As I mentioned, insurance was a large insurer was one of them. And I just found the whole industry really fascinating. And then I was asked to go start a digital offering at a independent network agency, and went off to do that. And they really specialized in finance and tech, but this was more in the traditional finance era, not in kind of retail banking and like direct to consumer. This was much more B2B. And so again, was, definitely fish out of water. There was a lot of nomenclature and acronyms and things I didn't understand. And I just learned very quickly that actually it's an incredibly interesting industry with where there's a lot of innovation happening and there's a lot of very clever thinking. And it's an industry where things actually move incredibly quickly, which was surprising to me, because you always think about sort of finance or insurance being very traditional and staid and slow moving, but actually in some areas, particularly from a technology standpoint, it moves very, very quickly. I also had a relatively interesting and strong regulatory background. So because I'd worked on some healthcare, which has very similar parallels to finance. So my understanding of how the industry operated was helped because of that. So then that's it was a combination of both being weirdly interested in an industry that I had no experience or education in, but also I think I was a rare anomaly because I was relatively young when I started working in it. I had, grown up and lived in different places in the world. And I was very interested in kind of how these businesses operated or how the industry operated in different ways globally. And I think that was incredibly helpful when you're working on sort of financial institutions, which tend to be very big and tend to be kind of cross-regional. And then what happened was I went in-house as a CMO in fintech, and that's how I ended up landing at Converge, because I actually knew the founders because they had come from a large insurer that I'd worked with previously, and they had asked me to help them as they were starting to build the business and launch and go to market.
Right. Cool. And you've kind of touched on a couple of points there. Super interesting background. But what's the kind of the main reason that led you to join Converge?
I think Converge is an incredibly innovative business for an industry that is ripe for change. And I mean that on several fronts. So first and foremost is cyber insurance is a relatively new industry within the insurance industry anyways. But then you have aspects where the technology that's driving the ability to underwrite and provide premiums faster and be able to help people have better ultimate outcomes as a policyholder, and also for the brokers who are managing this process in between. Like, everything can be accelerated because right now everything is about speed, and I think being able to use technology very smartly in that area, not just innovating for innovation's sake, but also keeping up with the rapid change that the whole cyber industry is facing, because this is where people are having the most threats on a daily basis. And I think helping people understand that it's a unique industry in that sense, but also I think the way that Converge has been built with an incredibly strong, seasoned team from the get-go, an incredibly diverse team, having people who are obviously experts within the insurance and tech industry and security side as well, but people who appreciate the fact that actually we can be operating and have expertise within this industry, but still have very different ways of thinking about it, different ways of coming at solving a problem, as well as being an incredibly sort of interesting group of people. So I think that has been one of the things that's really drawn me to it, and also the openness to want to do things differently and better. Is always what people want to do in a startup and what pushes them forward. So I think we have that at the heart of what we do at Converge as well, and the way that we really think about problem solving and developing solutions.
Right. And going back to your background, so I know one of the accolades that you've been recognized for is being one of Europe's, or in the top 100 Europe's most influential women within startups. And I know we've kind of discussed around that, how a big part of that is what you give back to the industry and the community over the years that you've remained in it. Can you just talk to us around your background, around your mentorship, and how you founded your own consultancy? Because I think that's really relevant of some of the work you're doing to kind of give back, hence why you've been recognized for this accolade.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it's an incredibly nice thing to be on that list, and it was kind of a surprise when it happened, and to be recognized in that way. I certainly didn't expect it, but I think it's because of my involvement within the fintech and the tech industries, working particularly with startups and founders, but also within the whole ecosystem with, venture capitalists, private equity incubators, as well as financial institutions who are, doing lots of programming around this and looking for ways to bridge into startups, whether it's as investors or, areas to drive innovation from an acquisition standpoint. And I think having different touch points and channels into that, having a fairly large network, but also, as you said, mentoring and coaching is a huge passion of mine, both personally and professionally. And I do that on, different levels, whether it's with founders and people who are very senior, all the, and at board level, all the way through to people who are starting their careers. And it's so important to me that we really help, we are able to share our knowledge and experience, but also we're able to learn about what's important to people coming through the workforce, what are the kind of issues or challenges that they're facing, but also how does that impact when I'm talking to senior leaders and they're having talent issues, or they're having struggles around organizational structure. And I think it helps inform so much of that. And you can only really know that if you're talking to people in a very honest way and getting a real understanding of what is challenging for them at this stage of their life or career versus what's challenging for, someone else who perhaps has been working for 10 or 20 years. And your career changes significantly. And I think that's something that's really impacted certainly since the last sort of 4 or 5 years, is that the speed of change is so much greater now. And the skill set that people need is much wider, than it used to be. And so being able to sort of work through that, but fundamentally, like, businesses and industries are still kind of structured the same way. So being able to kind of understand that dynamic and also work with people who are really interesting and people that I like and want to, keep relationships with, because I think that they're going to have incredible careers, is really important to me as well.
Yeah. And just on that point, so can you expand on where you said that things have clearly changed, right? Times have changed. And even if we look at Gen Z, right, of everyone's aware of some of the changes that we've had over the last 5 years from just an economic standpoint. If you look at that, what are some of the key changes that you've seen over the last 5 to 10 years with a marketing focus and how that's adapted?
First and foremost, I think that it is really tough right now. I think economically it's difficult. I think geopolitically it's difficult. I think people are facing a lot of just like sort of tough conditions. And, when I graduated from university, I was just sort of happy to get a job. Like, I wasn't, that was my goal. It was like, get a job. And I didn't have any kind of massive career plans in mind. I didn't really know where things were going to go. And I feel like Gen Z, or people who are in university or starting their careers or college or whatever, or apprenticeships, they just have to know so much earlier on what they want to do, and they have to be so laser focused. And it's really difficult to know that when you're young, and when you're 18 or 19 or you're 22. Like, to have that level of certainty is I think it's impossible and very unrealistic, but that is the reality that people are facing right now. Yeah. And I think on the flip side to that, more senior people are facing the challenges where, and I certainly think this as well, within marketing and comms, where, ChatGPT can probably write a great press release and can probably write a great PowerPoint presentation and do lots of things. And AI and machine learning are going to be able to, subsume and replace so many basic tasks. Now, can they completely replace creativity and innovation in the way that currently exists? I hope not. I don't think so. I think that's also what makes marketing such an interesting area to be in, because that has always had huge amounts of creativity, and it's been avant-garde. There's always ways to try different things. Now, marketing also has had to evolve substantially because of the digital, what's been happening digitally and what's been happening on the data side. And so all of a sudden, you kind of go from being like, we just need really great ideas that are going to cut through and be interesting to people, to like being able to track every single touch point and every single move that our customer is making, and every penny and dollar that they're spending their money on. And that's a huge, massive amount of information, but it's a different skill set as well. And so, being able to kind of keep up with all of those things, as well as like changing channels, as well as regulation, is like, there's a lot in that. So I think that there's a huge amount of challenges, both from a industry perspective, a workforce perspective, and a marketing perspective.
Yes, some great points there. I think chat GPT is an interesting one with AI advancing, isn't it? My opinion, I don't think prompt engineering will get good enough that it will have that human touch. I think that's just the main thing missing, isn't it? It's got that creativity, that human touch that AI, well, who knows? Maybe it will get better at, but I just don't think it'll be able to replicate.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think marketing, the heart of what is within marketing communications, is around telling stories and is around making people feel in a certain way. And ultimately, it's about human connection. That's what influences people. That's what drives them to make the decisions that they make. Regardless of what you're buying at the end. It could be insurance, it could be diapers. And I think that's what makes my job and like the industry so fascinating, because regardless of what it is that you're selling, you still need to think about it in a very, very human, interesting way, regardless of the end audiences, because people are still people, and it's still people spending money. I mean, it's not ChatGPT making decisions about, who's going to buy the cyber insurance policy. It's still a person. And I think we need to kind of recognize that and still keep that in mind, because we're still talking to people.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, interesting. And moving on to Converge then. So am I correct in saying Series A, I think 15 million was raised earlier this year, Series A?
That's right. So we did a Series A round of funding that happened in June, and very excited about that. We were also able to kind of go to market with our partners at QBE to launch our policy. And Converge has, as I said, everybody thinks the company they work for is very special, and I genuinely believe that. And I feel like I have worked with a lot of startups, both inside and from a consulting perspective, to really see that there is something particularly unique about Converge, not only in the way that there's kind of a couple of areas that I think we do things really well. One is that cyber insurance, as I mentioned, is a relatively new space. So finding the right legitimate expertise, not just within insurance, but within tech and within security, is really actually quite a difficult task. And you need to find that with people that you have great chemistry with, but also are pushing in the same direction. They sort of understand the problem that needs to be solved. Now, one of the fundamental problems is that cyber insurance is available, but it's actually not readily available or easy to access for certain audience groups. And one of those groups in particular is SMB, so small to medium businesses. Now, imagine how many of those exist in the US. They are like the economy's lifeblood, right? And they don't have access, or they are finding it very challenging to be able to get cyber insurance, because firstly, they don't really get it. They don't really know what it is. They don't really know what it covers. How is this different than other insurance that they have? And they don't really understand the impact that those threats may have on their business. And it's quite terrifying once you start looking under the car bonnet about the impact that obviously, a cyber incident can have on a small to medium business. It can put them out of business very, very quickly. And, you start thinking about that type of impact or scale. And then you just think, well, we've got to figure out a better way to do this and better solutions. And so Converge has been working to do that with our partners at QBE, but also doing it in a way that the long-term outcomes and sort of premiums are going to improve and be better. So it's not just buying insurance for protection and coverage sake. And so we're using, machine learning and AI within our tech, and a lot of very unique data points and data pools to be able to calculate that faster alongside expert underwriting, and then security protocols, so that we're able to kind of give people a whole end-to-end way of looking at the sort of cyber challenge that they may be facing as a business. And I think that's been very compelling. But again, I caveat that by saying that it only works because we have a really senior expert team that has such a huge amount of industry experience, that when you put that together, they're actually the ones who would probably be like litmus testing whether or not this actually could work in reality. So, or they have they've got strong broker background, so they're like, well, sell to me. Like if I'm not going to buy it, then this solution isn't right. And I think that working in that kind of business is the right way to start, where we're almost selling to ourselves to really figure it out. But it's also a very diverse business. We have almost a 50-50 gender split, which again, for an industry like insurance, is quite rare. And we have people who have very, very backgrounds. I mean, our CEO, Tong Kang, is Korean American. He's minority. I'm Chinese Canadian. Like, I think there's lots of people within the business where we have very, very varied backgrounds, and that really, I think, adds a lot to the experience and also the expertise that we're able to, like, we can think about being an immigrant mindset and being a small business owner. Well, that's who we're trying to solve problems for. So having that is hugely additive, I think.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And is there any like tips or strategies that you can share around the diversity piece from a workforce perspective of how Converge have been successful in doing that, or bringing that together? Or is it just more of a coincidence, or is there some sort of like structural background to how that's been put together?
I think you have to make it part of how you fundamentally want to build your business. So, and it, of course, it's a challenging industry to find diversity, if I'm going to be honest. But we really, really work hard to build that in. We've now brought in a female front-end engineer into our tech team. And I think being able to, and it's not just about obviously gender and things like that make businesses diverse, but I think it is, when you start off in an area where you're already in an industry where there's a huge lack of diversity, then to say, actually, as a business, we care about this. It's important. It's part of our kind of fundamental value set. And it's also, we recognize that it's important to how we make the business better. Yeah. How do we innovate? How do we come up with more, interesting solutions? And we're able to sort of help and support more people. That's ultimately what we want to do as a business. And I think building that in from day one has been something that's been fundamental to the leadership team, and making sure that it's a great, safe, interesting place for people to work, I think has been really compelling. And so we've seen that people haven't just wanted to join our business, but they wanted to join it because the value set is right. And that becomes hugely important, particularly to people who are starting their careers in the workforce, because they don't just want to work for any old company, and they don't just want to get a paycheck anymore. So, and that's been massively important to everyone in the business.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And why is marketing important to Converge?
Well, I'd like to say, well, I think marketing is probably important to any business, but I think marketing is important to Converge because we have some pretty unique and specialized audience sets that we need to speak to. And it's also fundamentally how we are driving profile recognition and driving sales. So it's a massive part of, hopefully driving the top line in the business, but it's also a way that we set our stall and we talk about who we are and the kind of business that we are building and what makes us special. And that is through marketing. And of course, the proof is in the pudding. Ultimately, it has to be in how the business performs and what we offer into the market. But the reality is, I think, why I love working with the team and in the business is, like, we're very connected. And I think marketing is a very lucky team and area because we get to work very cross departmentally. So we work with like everybody in the business, talking to them about their expertise, thinking about ways that we can showcase what we do as a team, as a business, but also what we offer, the products that we're developing. Like we have to know what else is out there. We have to know what's going to make us unique. And I think that that's always what's made marketing such an interesting, such an interesting place to work, because it is pretty fundamental, but it also takes time. It's not an instant magic bullet to everything, but everybody knows that it's fundamental in terms of how you grow a business, how you drive revenue, how you manage your reputation. And so those are all things that for any business, but particularly when you're starting out and nobody knows who you are so vital.
Yeah, great. And to wrap up this podcast, Vivienne, if you could rewind the years, say 10, 15, 20 years ago, you go back to the start of your career, what advice would you give yourself now, knowing what you know?
I think there's probably three things I wish I had known back then. I think the first is, be a sponge and like learn fast, ask questions. Like, don't be afraid to be curious and learn. Don't be intimidated by, other people or people that you think are smarter than you. Just try and learn as much as you can. And I think that is hugely powerful. I think the second thing is to not be afraid of change. Change is inevitable, and it's just keeps happening faster and faster at the moment. And I think the faster you're able to adapt to that, the more successful you will be longer term. And I think the last thing is back yourself. Like I've now had experience working at agencies, at consultancies, running my own business, working in-house. And I would say that all of that has been incredibly powerful, just to kind of give you the confidence to say it is okay to do things differently and in your own way, but also to have the confidence to sort of back your own ideas and your own vision and your own opinions about things. Obviously you need to be collaborative and listen, but don't be afraid to share that, and I think that's those are the things I sort of wish I had known more of back in the day.
Yeah, great tips. Awesome. And if our audience want to get in touch with Converge, what's the best way that they can do that?
Probably the best way is to obviously look us up. So Converge Insurance. You can find us on LinkedIn as well. And you can always email us at info@convergeins.com. We'd love to hear from you. So those are all ways you can find us.
Great. And before we wrap up, is there anything that you wanted to add to this recording?
No, I think it's been great. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, Stefan. So thank you so much for having me on.
Likewise, Vivienne. Yeah, it's been great to have you. And yeah, thanks again so much for your time, and we'll chat soon.
Great. Thank you.